you're just being an anti-Semite. I'm trying to have a conversation. I did not mention Jews or Judaism. I'm talking Israel. I'm talking violations of human rights by a governmental entity. I'm talking about democracy and things like that. So that's one way. And to that extent, I'd say read the book A Wall in Jerusalem. It's a great book that talks about the church and kind of how that narrative has come through. Another is through money. Wealthy owners. I mean, right now the hot issue is Steve Salaita from University of Illinois Chicago, who was terminated. Champaign. Who was terminated 2 weeks prior to a guaranteed tenure that he was received because of voicing his opinions on Twitter. And wealthy donors, I mean, at least the narrative in the news and the media right now, and I say media because we'll talk about news in a minute. They basically are going in and saying, we're going to pull out our funding, or we're going to impact you financially if you don't pull out this person who's just talking about this, whatever, and it's creating a whole hullabaloo right now. And then there's the Ohio University Senate student who talked about the massacre in Gaza, and all of a sudden she's being persecuted. They're targeted personality assassins, go after the person who's speaking about it, damage their reputation, ruin their reputation, discredit them. Many things that sound like conspiracy theories, but honestly, this is what's going on the ground. But a big part of it, too, is the other side of the story is not heard because of media, for the most part, has been you sitting in front of the TV or the radio and listening to one side. There was no interaction between the two. And a lot of it came from influential voices, putting the narrative in the sense that, look at this, this country that's bringing academics, that's bringing industry, that's bringing innovation to the Middle East, that's bringing it to those Arab savages. They look like you. Their names don't sound like Ahmed Abdelmageed. You don't have to strain to pronounce the name. And you naturally tend to listen to that, and that's been the dominant narrative. The switch right now in the last few years is social media. And what we're seeing on Twitter and Facebook and live feeds and all of that, the other truths are coming out, and people are actually engaging in conversations because they're seeing more than just one controlled outlet. If I'm a movie producer, I make a movie that 30 million people watch, I can put my spin on it. 30 million people will watch it, and we'll take that as information from it. But again, that's my anecdotal comments on that. Would you like to add any? Thank you. Does that kind of answer it?
Well, it answers part of it. I don't want to take up too much time, but I guess what the crux of my question is, there are a lot of facets of the power structure. I mean, military, industrial complex, people who have, ties to Zionism more directly. I suppose, Jewish people and lobbies and things like that. Christian Zionism now, another factor. But at some point, for example, Noam Chomsky, I think, says that following, it might have been the 1967 war, that the power structure kind of as a whole said, okay, maybe we can side with Israel, maybe that's what we got to do. I mean, aren't there people, very powerful people, that really aren't that concerned about Israel per se, that kind of see that it's beneficial for the power structure as they represent it to side with Israel, so that it isn't just the fact of Zionists, taking over the public dialogue and everybody else that has money and influence sitting back and watching it, but that it's more, more of a multifaceted thing. I'm just kind of curious about that side of it.
We're gonna get some other questions, but Jeff, let me just, from my end, Chomsky's argument, it makes sense to me.
Okay.
No, I've read quite a bit, and you can't underestimate his argument. Who else would like to jump in?
Each of you spoke from the perspective of a survivor. I think, Ahmed, I think that was your word, but each of you are survivors from the Palestinian expulsion, the Nakba, and I've seen that among refugee populations from Afghanistan and from other countries, that those who make it here have some special survivor instinct, it seems to me. You know, they weren't willing to stay put. But what of your feelings toward those who did? And can you make those who are still stuck in Gaza? I mean, how has that impacted your life?
Speaking as a Palestinian, I look at everybody in the West Bank and Gaza as family. So in the evening when we go home, we hug our kids, sit down and watch TV, watch what's happening around the world, try to enjoy our nice, beautiful homes in here. And you could see on TV, there's homeless, homes being bombed, people are hungry, people are killed. And people simply, they don't have the basic right is just to go to their work or to go to school. In my hometown, last time I went there were a curfew, and people and they have cousins and second cousins and nephews and nieces. They're trying to go to their schools, where their school approximately 25 minutes walk sometimes. They will have to leave the house around 5 in the morning, so they can go to a checkpoint and wait an hour, maybe 2 hours, till a soldier open that particular checkpoint so they can go to school. That if he chose to open that particular checkpoint so they can attend school. And on the way home, sometimes that's what happened. So a lot of families, they'll find them, a couple of families, if you rent a place 20 minutes away. So the kids don't have to commute back and forth to their homes. So when I see my kids going, I live like in Amish country outside of Leo. When I see my son in the morning, he could ride his bicycle and work. Now they could drive to go to school and enjoy it and come home. So it made me feel, how am I gonna, you know, when you see your brother, your sister, your cousin, your aunt can't have that little simple privilege to go to school or go to the store without someone telling them when and how to go there. So it makes it hard for us to enjoy those little things. Just thinking of someone that day, he or she or they, God knows where they're getting their next meal. So how can you enjoy that dinner when you sit down with your wife and kids and family? Be thankful.
Great question, Terry, and thank you for that. Like, it's never off your mind what's going on back home. Again, I consider everyone in Palestine to be my family, whether directly or indirectly. I still have some distant relatives that live there. And I was asked that question actually by a high school student during Gaza, what's happening just recently. And she said, how could you sleep at night knowing what's happening to Palestinians in Gaza or to your people? Why aren't you there fighting? Or why aren't you there defending? Or why aren't you there, basically? And it made me think a little more about my life here. And honestly, the best way that I answered it to her is that, again, it wasn't my choice to be here, but I am here, and I have to serve a purpose. Whenever I speak with people about Middle East versus the United States, one line that I say is that U.S. government policies are not representative of the American street. American public is not what you see. It's not John Kerry, it's not Bush, it's not Obama. It's not the policies of the United States in the Middle East. But the people of the United States are, for the most part, misinformed. And my purpose of just being is to provide information. I'm always an ambassador for my country. I'm always an ambassador for my faith. I'm always an ambassador of that region. So, and God blessed me with an ability to speak to people, and I'm going to use that. And I'm going to talk, and we're going to raise questions. We're going to try and defeat some misinformation about that. And that's what keeps me going at night. That's how I can help the people over there. For the first time in the 18 years that I've been here, I'm speaking to a predominantly non-Arab, non-Muslim people. That's changed. You know, when we were in college, it was just us, the Palestinians, the Arabs, the Muslims, whatever, talking about what's happening over there. Right now, people are listening. And that's what I saw, the beauty of again, the United States public in general, and my ability to contribute is to bring my message to others, even if it's on broken record, auto-repeat, the same message over and over and over again. Eventually, it'll get somewhere.
Dr. Halaby, would you want to jump in on this?
In answer to your question, it basically saying, why are you here instead of there? There is inherently the instinct of survival always would lead a human being towards a place of less pain rather than more pain. That's sort of inherently built. There are other subtle issues involved. For example, a lot of countries have a brain drain. When somebody gets educated, their opportunity for work there is limited, and the U.S. government makes it easier for people who are well educated to get into the United States. And that's unfortunately, the brain drain that goes on not only in the Middle East, but elsewhere.
Who's next? Steve, please.
One of the things that you had mentioned earlier about the pre-Zionist period of time where there was a lot of, well, there was a peaceful relationship between the various ethnic and religious groups in Palestine. And just fast forwarding into your experience here in the Fort Wayne area, do you find an opportunity to build relationships with Jewish people here? And if so, what's that like as you share your story, they share theirs, their fears of however they experience their fears about what's happening?
Steve asked the question about how you share this kind of life experience and your feelings with Jewish folks here in the U.S., particularly in this community. Just pass it on down.
Yes. I had quite a number of Jewish friends when I was on the staff of St. Joseph's Hospital. Most of the Jewish physicians were practicing there, and we had a very good, warm relationship, and I consider some of them close friends, where we visited each other's home. There wasn't a problem at all, so I haven't. I don't see that ever was a problem.
I want to talk before about my experience here. In my hometown in Naples, there's a whole neighborhood. They call it Harat al-Sumar, which is the Jewish neighborhood. And we visited. They have their own celebrations, they have their own holidays, so families went and they cooked for us, and the same thing, they celebrated our Muslim holidays. And I myself from that town where, I could go to the 17th grandfather who lived in the same town. And there's always been Jewish neighborhood there. So coming to the United States and going to school in Boston, I actually, Boston University is on the outskirts of Brooklyn, Massachusetts, and mainly Jewish. So when we can talk politics, we leave Israel out of it. We played soccer, we kicked a ball together, we ate, we drank, we had parties and enjoyed it. And working in that gas station on Route 9, which goes to Newton, Massachusetts, which is not mainly Jewish, so I always waited on them, pumped their gas, gave a tip, and we never talk about that, where you're from. I'm from Palestine. Well, some people say that's great, some people say it doesn't exist. But the fact of the matter, we managed to cope together. And a person that was very instrumental of me becoming a citizen and get my green card there, happened to be a Jewish gentleman. And the fact of the matter, him and I until now we communicated, and He just happened to be a neighbor of Senator then Jack Beckman from Massachusetts. That's how the whole thing happened. So I don't see why we can't really coexist, but once again, it has to be on equal right, equal opportunity. We have to be equal. So we can't have a superior or somebody to be, telling us what to do all the time. So
What would you like to see happen in this generation, in our generation, for some
Dick,
kind of solution?
let Ahmed jump in here with his, and then we'll get to your question next, okay?
I've only been here for 3 years, so I haven't had many opportunities, but with the interfaith work that I do, I've sat with a couple of the local rabbis, and we had conversations about religion and Islam and Judaism and Christianity and all that. But again, it was on religious basis. We never got into the Israel-Palestine issue. The closest thing to it was a year ago, I think, when we had Miko Peled and one gentleman in the crowd stood up and said Palestinians don't even exist. So, that's another thing. But again, when you bring up the issue of Israel, and the question that is being asked among a lot of the younger Jewish generation, especially, as they see the consequences of Israel and they leave Israel and come to the U.S. and hear the other narratives, is the question is why Zionism is exclusively equated with Judaism. Why can we not separate the political entity from the religious entity? And that's the big question, and that's where the lines get blurred a lot.
Religion borrows. Every religion, Father Larson said that borrowed from Judaism. Look at the Bible. Get real about education.
Yeah, so get real about education, exactly. And let's educate people that not every Jewish person is a Zionist and not every Zionist is Jewish. You have Christian Zionism, you have all that. So let's separate a political entity with a political agenda from a religious entity with a religious, with religious freedoms and everything else. And that's where we can have the narrative. And if I may jump on your question, your question was what would you like to see? A little while ago I said, I'm done praying for peace. At this point, I'm praying for justice. What I'd like to see is justice. That government and whatever other factions that have done injustices to Palestinians or Israelis or whoever it might be, I want that to be dealt with. I want us as a world to raise to bringing back this area to coexistence that had before the establishment of the country of Israel. Let's look at the policies. If Israel is our ally, and we're going to hold all of our allies accountable to their actions, then let's look at the policies of Israel, internally and externally. And let's be true friends to the state of Israel, if we are, as Americans, are allies with the state of Israel, and hold them accountable to their actions, to their discriminatory laws, to their actions against the Palestinians living in Gaza and West Bank. And let's have that conversation. And then let's have the justice done, and we'll have the coexistence that used to be beforehand. I'm not calling for the annihilation of any people. I'm not calling for the destruction of any country. What I'm calling for is restitution of my rights and an ability to live in peace with whomever in a country that treats everyone equally. And that's why I live in the United States, by the way.
Did you want to address that, Dr. Halaby? It's a big question, of course.
It seems like a question that really has no answer unless a lot of basic things change.
There has to be an answer somewhere.
Hopefully time will moderate that to have an answer. Basically, you have an injustice done to citizens of Russia, Germany, Hungary, who happen to be Jewish, and what happened to them is awful. I mean, there's no word to describe how bad it is. And I think to a great extent there is the collective guilt of Europeans in general, and the U.S. as well, although the U.S. had nothing to do with it. but there is still an underlying sense of guilt for what the Germans did to the Jewish population in Europe. And it seems like sometimes I think the support for Israel as such from this country is something somehow to assuage the guilt that we feel for not doing or not being able to do something about it from the start. But that doesn't really still solve the problem of what the Israelis, not necessarily Jews, the Israelis have done to the Palestinians. So, I mean, there are two injustices, and I don't know, I really don't know if there's any solution that is in present day attitudes in Israel or in the Palestinian camp that can be bridged.
Did you want to say something more about the passport?
Well, in these days, lots of people say there were never such a thing as a state of Palestine. And I mentioned I'm like one of those people, I have to feel it, I have to see it, to believe it. So I just happen to have a Palestinian passport that was issued in the 30s. So before the state of Israel ever was created, they were a state of Palestine. There's a passport that like maybe everybody touches very rare, so happened to be...
Well, maybe we'll leave it up here and then...
That happened to be my father's passport, who just passed away last July, almost 100 years old. So before that, I was born in the same house that he was born in, and also his great-grandfather. So that's his passport, which is a Palestinian passport. So it's the proudest thing, the most valuable thing I ever owned.
We have time for one more question. Stan?
Have any of you suffered any consequences for speaking out on behalf of Palestinians?
Have any, you heard the question?
Yes,
Have any of you suffered any consequences for speaking out on behalf of Palestinians?
I alluded to that in when I talked. There was a chance that I could have gotten medical school in Cincinnati, but things, whoever made a decision subsequently erased that. But that's the only really experience I had for speaking out.
Well, I myself have a lot to talk about that. So in 2002, after the Israeli massacre in Jenin, I took to the streets. I was the first guy really to organize such a thing. It was me and my two kids in front of the courthouse. At the end of the day, we had probably 15, 16 people. And a local gentleman, everybody know him, I don't want to mention names, said, I wouldn't do that if I was you. You have a business, you have family, you have establishments. So I did, I brought some attention and moved on. After Miko Bullet, actually the exact same day when I stood in the room and when he said there's no such Palestinian, I said, I am Palestinian. A few days later, local lawyer sitting here, and a few other people, I realized that my banker called me, and he said, well, hey, you have your line of credit with us here. I said, yeah. I said, well, it's not going to be renewed. No question asked, which is luckily Palestinians are survivors, so I built a lot of connection. I took my business elsewhere out of town to bank. And until now, I never got a why. And most recently, I found that. And I mentioned it, whether it was somebody who happened to be on the board of that. So just speaking, a lot of coincidence.
Cannot be proven in a court, as I was told by the ombudsperson of Wayne State University. But when I was, I had to take a couple of courses to finish my prerequisites for pharmacy school, so I took them at Wayne State University in Detroit, and I was living in Ontario. And my thing was, if I meet those requirements, get the GPA, your GPA is high enough, you're guaranteed a spot in the College of Pharmacy at Wayne State, and you get the tuition, they call it the Good Neighbor Program. You get the same tuition as a resident of Michigan by being from Ontario. So that would have cost me about $30,000, $40,000 to get my education. In the mail, I received a letters of rejection to the College of Pharmacy, but I had, at the end of the year, where I maintained, I think, a 4.0, there were a couple of really easy courses. So coming in, I had the GPA, I need to just complete those and not fail them, and I got a letter of rejection saying that you don't get into the College of Pharmacy. So when I went back, and I talked to the ombudsperson, and I talked to the College of Pharmacy, the dean was saying, well, they messed up your conversion of grades from Canadian system to the American system, and you came up below the average, and the associate dean said, well, no, you had the above the average, so sorry. I said, okay, but you now see my corrected grades and I can get in here. I said, no, we already sent the letters out and everybody is accepted into the program. That's of course my narrative, but the tidbit of information that I neglected to mention is the fact that in 2000, that's when Sharon went into Al-Aqsa Mosque and the second Intifada kind of happened. And I organized a protest on campus that was fiercely opposed by the administration until I had someone who came and said, screw those select words, select words, select words. I'll give you whatever you need to have your protest. We had brought a few... Long story short, apparently it was the first political protest on campus since the Vietnam War. And to that extent, they didn't want this troublemaker kid to be amongst them. But again, that's my narrative, that's my view of the story. Can't be proven in court, and I incurred a $120,000 debt to graduate pharmacy school.
Let's say thank you to our speakers tonight. We want to say thank you to Plymouth Church. We want to say thank you to the Muslim women who prepared our food for tonight. We want to say thank you to our speakers. We want to say thank you to you for coming. Please visit our table in the back. You'll find information about our upcoming programs. You have those on your flyers. Please take them with you. We hope to see you at Where Should the Birds Fly to on September 25th. Dr. David Was, October 9th. And there's tickets to be sold back at our table for our gala, October the 25th. Please stop and buy your tickets tonight and consider becoming a benefactor. Thank you so much, folks, for being here. It's really good to see you all. It's good to be back this fall with a whole New Year's program. Godspeed you on your way home tonight, and thanks for being here.